The evening of May 27th was muggy and heavy, like most Texas evenings in late spring. Detective Kadesha Rawlings parked her beat-up Toyota on the side of Magnolia Street and headed toward the scene of the crime. Red and blue patrol car lights cut through the twilight, casting strange shadows on the facades of the crooked houses. She knew this part of Beaumont like the back of her hand. She had spent her childhood and youth here, and now she had to investigate crimes here. Officer Marcus Hill, a young man with a serious expression, approached her with a notepad in his hands. "What do we have?" Rawlings asked curtly, pulling on her rubber gloves. "Zephaniah Waters, 45 years old. Neighbors found the body around 10:30 last night. He's lying over there on the porch of his house." Rawlings approached the body and crouched down. Zephaniah Waters was lying on his back with his arms outstretched. His skull was fractured near the temple, and dark blood had spread across the cracked asphalt. The man was of strong build and dressed in work clothes, jeans and a plaid shirt. His hands had calluses, typical of a mechanic. "Did you find the murder weapon?" "Not yet, but it looks like he was hit with something heavy and blunt, maybe a wrench or a hammer." The detective carefully examined the scene. Car keys were scattered near the body, and there were scuff marks on the asphalt, as if the victim had tried to crawl away. There were abrasions on the knuckles of Waters' right hand, indicating that he had tried to defend himself. "Where's the family?" "In the house. His wife is hysterical, and the children are at home too." Rawlings stood up and looked around at the small, one-story house with peeling paint and a crooked fence. It was typical working-class housing in this part of town. An old Chevrolet, presumably the victim's work vehicle, was parked in the yard. She decided to question the neighbors first. Mrs. Johnson, an elderly woman from the house across the street, peeked out from behind the curtain and reluctantly came out onto the porch. "I didn't see anything," she said immediately. "But I heard screams around midnight. A man's voice, very loud. I thought it was another family quarrel at the Waters." "Did they often quarrel?" "Well, not every day, but it happened. Zeph had been acting nervous lately, and yesterday they had loud music playing late into the night." The other neighbors didn't have much to say either. Everyone had heard the noise around midnight, but no one had gone out to see what was happening. In this neighborhood, people preferred not to get involved in other people's business. It was time to meet the family. Rawlings knocked on the Waters' door. A middle-aged woman with tear-stained eyes opened the door. Althea Waters was overweight, with neatly styled hair and a simple black dress. A gold cross hung around her neck. "Mrs. Waters? Detective Rawlings, Beaumont Police. I'm sorry for your loss." Althea pressed a handkerchief to her eyes and nodded, letting the detective into the house. The small living room was furnished with cheap furniture but was clean. Family photos and religious images hung on the walls. A young girl sat on the sofa, huddled in a corner. Dark hair covered half her face, but Rawlings noticed her beautiful, though tear-stained, features. It was Eloise, Althea's 18-year-old daughter from her first marriage. "Eloise, is that you?" the detective asked gently. The girl looked up and nodded without saying a word. Her gaze revealed not only fear, but something else, shame or guilt. At that moment, a young man in his 20s emerged from the kitchen, Jedediah Jameson, Althea's eldest son. Broad-shouldered, with short hair and several tattoos on his arms. His gaze was hard and aggressive. "Jed, this is the detective," his mother introduced him. "I see," the young man muttered, making no attempt to hide his hostility. "So what now?" "I need to ask all the family members a few questions," Rawlings explained. "It's standard procedure." She started with Althea. The woman spoke incoherently, sobbing periodically. "Zeph worked as a mechanic at the factory. He was a good man, took care of us. But in the last few weeks, he'd become strange. Nervous, he often left the house, saying he had important things to do, and last night he came home very late, angry. He said he was going out for some air, and I didn't see him again." "What time was that?" "Around 11:30, maybe a little later." "And where were the children at that time?" "At home, of course. Eloise was in her room, Jed was watching TV. Rawlings turned to Eloise. "Can you confirm that you were at home all evening?" The girl nodded slowly. "Yes, I was doing my homework. Then I went to bed." "Did you hear your stepfather leave the house?" No, I had music playing on my headphones. It was Jed's turn. The boy sat slumped in his chair, feigning indifference. Where were you last night? At the Red Rooster Bar. I was drinking beer with friends until closing time. I got home after 1 in the morning. Any witnesses? Ask Tony. He works behind the bar. I'm there almost every night. Rawlings wrote the information down in her notebook. So far, everything seemed fairly normal, but experience told her that in family murders, the truth rarely lies on the surface. Mrs. Waters, did your husband have any enemies? Debts? Conflicts at work? Althea shook her head. No, he got along with everyone. Except, she hesitated. What? Lately, he's been spending money. He said it was for medicine, but I didn't see any medicine at home. That was an interesting detail. Rawlings asked permission to examine the deceased's personal belongings. In the bedroom, in the bedside table, among bills and documents, she found a medical folder. Inside were test results from the Mercy Clinic, dated a month earlier. Rawlings scanned the lines and felt herself tense up. HIV test results. The result? Positive. Zephaniah Waters had AIDS, and judging by the dates, he had found out relatively recently. The question was whether his family knew about it, and if so, how they had reacted to the news. In religious African American families, such diagnoses were often a source of shame and conflict. The detective carefully put the documents back in the folder. This case promised to be much more complicated than it seemed at first glance. The next morning, Rawlings went to the Mobile Oil Refinery where Zephaniah Waters worked. The industrial complex was located on the outskirts of Beaumont, shrouded in a haze of chemical fumes. A significant portion of the local African American population worked here. The work was hard but relatively stable and well paid. The foreman, Roy Carter, met the detective in his cramped office, littered with technical drawings and reports. Zeph was a good worker, he said, rubbing his gray beard. 12 years at the plant, never a serious infraction. But in the last 2 months, he's been kind of strange. In what way? He was often asking for time off. First it was doctor's appointments, then family matters. He hardly ever took sick leave before. And he didn't look well. He'd lost weight and was pale. We thought maybe he had stomach or heart problems. Rawlings jotted down the information in her notebook. Carter continued. And 3 weeks ago, he was caught making a phone call from work. He was talking to someone very quietly, but when he saw that he was being listened to, he immediately hung up. That wasn't like him. Do you remember what time he usually called? During the lunch break, around noon. An interesting detail. Rawlings spoke to several of Zeph's colleagues. Everyone noted changes in his behavior, but no one could say exactly what was going on. The next stop was the Red Rooster Bar, where, according to Jed, he had spent the evening of the murder. The bar was located in the basement of an old brick building. Tony Williams, a bartender with gold teeth and tattooed arms, recognized Jed from the description. Yes, Jedediah comes here often. He was here that night too, he confirmed, wiping glasses. But he didn't leave at 2 like usual. He left earlier. Around 11:30, maybe 11:45. Did he say anything? What did he look like? Gloomier than usual. He drank his beer silently, didn't talk to anyone. When he left, he said something like, I have something to take care of. I thought it was family stuff. Jed's alibi was cracking. If he left the bar at 11:45, he could have made it home by midnight, which was when the neighbors heard the screams. Rawlings decided to check on Eloise at college. Belmont Community College was a small educational institution where local youth received a basic education. Eloise was a first-year student majoring in administration. Her English teacher, Mrs. Clark, spoke with concern about the girl. Eliza is a capable student, but in recent months, she has been missing classes. When she does come, she seems depressed and distracted. Her grades have dropped significantly. Has she explained why she's been absent? She mentioned family problems. I offered her the services of a psychologist, but she refused. And then 2 weeks ago, she stopped coming altogether. Rawlings contacted the Mercy Medical Clinic, where Zeph had been tested. The administrator was reluctant to provide information about other patients with the last name Jameson. It turned out that Eloise had also recently undergone an examination. I can't disclose medical information, said the woman at the front desk. But if you have a court order, this is a murder investigation, Rawlings replied firmly. The girl may be in danger. After some hesitation, the administrator finally showed her the file. Eloise Jameson had been tested 10 days ago. The results were shocking. HIV positive and approximately 8 weeks pregnant. The 18-year-old girl had the same diagnosis as her murdered stepfather. The coincidence seemed extremely unlikely. Rawlings spent the rest of the day watching the Waters house from a distance. The atmosphere in the family was clearly tense. Althea only went out to the corner store, returning with her eyes downcast. Eloise did not leave the house at all. Jed went out into the yard twice, both times talking aggressively on the phone and waving his arms. In the evening, the detective decided to visit the neighbors again and ask more specific questions. Old Mr. Brown, who lived in the house to the right of the Waterses, turned out to be more observant than he seemed. "You were asking about the Zeff family," he said, rocking in his rocking chair on the porch. "Well, I've seen him and his stepdaughter driving off together several times, in his car." "When was that?" "It started 3 or 4 months ago. At first, I thought maybe he was taking her to college or work. But it was strange. They drove at lunchtime, when the girl shouldn't have had classes." "Where did they go?" "Towards the city center, and they came back an hour and a half or 2 hours later." Eloise always looked upset, and Zeff looked happy. Mrs. Johnson, whom Rawlings had interviewed the day before, also recalled the details. "Now that you mention it, yes, I saw them a couple of times near the old gas station on Cypress Avenue. Zeff was saying something to the girl, and she was crying. I thought maybe her stepfather was scolding her for bad grades. But now these encounters took on a completely different meaning. The gas station on Cypress Avenue had been closed for a long time and stood abandoned, the perfect place for secret meetings. Rawlings felt the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together into a disgusting picture of Zephaniah Waters, a 45-year-old man who had been having an intimate relationship with his 18-year-old stepdaughter. He had infected her with HIV and made her pregnant. And when the girl may have tried to end the relationship, tragedy struck. The question remained, who exactly killed Zeff? Eloise herself in a fit of despair? Or her brother Jed, who found out what was going on? Or perhaps Althea, who discovered her husband's affair with her own daughter? The detective got into her car and turned on the air conditioning. The Texas heat was becoming unbearable, and the case promised to be even more difficult. In family tragedies like this, there were no winners, only victims, and those who tried to protect them too late. Tomorrow, she would have to confront the Waters family. It was time to stop beating around the bush and start asking direct, uncomfortable questions. The next morning, Rawlings returned to the Waters house with the firm intention of getting to the bottom of things. In her pocket was a folder with medical records, both Zeff's and Eloise's. It was time to stop playing cat and mouse and get the family to tell the truth. Althea opened the door. The woman looked even worse than yesterday. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair was disheveled. Her black dress was wrinkled, as if she had slept in it. "Detective, is something wrong? I need to talk to the whole family, right now." All three gathered in the living room. Eloise sat in the same corner of the sofa. Jed settled into an armchair, his legs spread wide. Althea nervously fiddled with the hem of her dress. Rawlings placed the folder with the documents on the coffee table and looked closely at each of those present. "In 2 days of investigation, I've discovered some interesting things," she began. "Your husband, Mrs. Waters, was HIV positive. He found out a month ago." Althea gasped and pressed her hand to her heart. "What? That can't be. Zeff never said anything." "The documents don't lie." Rawlings opened the folder and showed the test results. "But that's not all. Eloise, you also recently had tests done at the same clinic." The girl raised her head sharply. Horror flashed in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Rawlings said harshly, and took out a second report. "HIV positive, pregnant, 8 weeks along." Althea slowly turned to her daughter, her face showing complete incomprehension. "Eliza? What does this mean? Who is the father?" The girl began to shake. Jed jumped up from his chair. "What the hell is going on here?" Rawlings kept her eyes fixed on Eloise. "Tell them the truth, about your meetings with your stepfather, about the trips to the abandoned gas station, about what happened between you over the last 6 months.
No, the girl whispered. No, I can't.
But the dam broke. Eloise covered her face with her hands and burst into tears.
He made me. I didn't want to, but he said he'd kick us out of the house if I didn't agree.
Althea recoiled as if she had been struck.
My God, Eloise, what are you saying?
He started hitting on me last fall, the girl continued, sobbing. At first, he just touched me when you weren't home. Then he started demanding more. He said I should be grateful for a roof over my head, for food, for supporting our family. Jed stood frozen, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. That bastard, he croaked. That scumbag. And when I found out I was pregnant and went to get tested, Eloise continued, it turned out I had contracted the disease. I tried to tell him that I wouldn't do it anymore, that it was over. But he wouldn't listen. Althea shook her head, repeating, it can't be. The night he was killed, Eloise looked at the detective. He came to my room again. My mother was already asleep and Jed was supposed to be home late from the bar. Zeph was drunk and angry. He said I was his property and had to do what he wanted. Rowlings listened intently, writing down every word. I tried to push him away. I screamed, but he was stronger. He started tearing my clothes off, and then Jed came back. All eyes turned to the young man. He stood there, breathing heavily, his face contorted with rage and pain. I heard my sister screaming, he said hoarsely. I ran up to the porch and saw through the window how he was raping Eloise. Jed, Rowlings warned. I broke into the house, the young man continued, ignoring the detective. I started pulling him off my sister. Zeph turned around and hit me in the face. He told me to get out and mind my own business. And what did you do? I lost control. I grabbed a wrench that was lying on the nightstand. Zeph always brought his tools home. And I hit him. I just wanted to stop him, but I hit him too hard. Althea fell back into the chair, covering her face with her hands. Tears trickled through her fingers. After that, Zeph staggered and ran for the door. Jed continued. I caught up with him in the yard. We fought and I hit him again with the wrench. On the head. He fell and didn't get up. Rowlings took out her handcuffs. Jedediah Jameson, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You have the right to remain silent. Wait. Jed raised his hands. I don't regret what I did. That bastard got what he deserved. But my sister, she's a victim. He abused her for months, infected her with a deadly disease, got her pregnant. Someone had to stop him. That's for the court to decide, not you, the detective replied, snapping the handcuffs shut. Eloise got up from the couch and walked over to her brother. Jed, I'm sorry. If I had told Mom right away. It's not your fault, little sister, he said gently. It's never your fault. Rowlings called for backup to transport the arrested man. While they waited, she took a detailed statement from Eloise. The girl told her how Zephaniah Waters had forced her into intimacy for months, threatening to throw her family out onto the street if she told anyone. How he took her to deserted places where no one could see them. How she tried to resist, but was afraid to leave her mother and brother without a roof over their heads. He said I wanted it, Eloise said quietly, that all girls my age are like that, and that if I told anyone, no one would believe me, because he was a grown man, the breadwinner of his family, and I was just a stupid girl. Althea listened, rocking back and forth as if trying to lull her pain to sleep. When the patrol car drove Jed away, she finally spoke. I should have known. I should have protected my children. What kind of mother am I? It's not your fault, said Rowlings. Zephaniah Waters was an experienced manipulator. He knew how to use your difficult financial situation to force Eloise into silence. The detective gathered her documents and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned and looked at the broken family. Althea Waters was left alone with her pregnant daughter, who was HIV positive. Her only son was going to prison for murder. The family had no money. Zeph was the main breadwinner. As she got into her car, Rowlings thought about how social inequality and poverty make people vulnerable to violence. In families where every dollar counts, where there is no money for separate housing or a good lawyer, predators feel at home. Zephaniah Waters knew full well that Althea would not be able to support her children without his help, and he used this to coerce his stepdaughter. Education also played a role. Eloise did not know her rights or where to turn for help. There was no one around her who could explain to her that what was happening was a crime and not her fault. Rowling started the engine and slowly drove down Magnolia Street. The case was closed, the killer arrested, but she felt no victory. Too many lives had been destroyed, justice had come too late.
E.